This morning I'll be reading 3 verses. Verse comes from Proverbs 18:15. The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out. Secondly, we have Hebrews 12:11. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. And lastly, Proverbs 1:8 and 9. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They are a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck.
Good morning. So I get to introduce myself. I never get to do this. This is fun. I can tell you all the good stuff and none of the bad. Now, for those of you that weren't here for our Bible class, I'm glad you're here. I'm thrilled that you are here. Hope that you'll hang out. I get to say this too, and they can't stop me. I hope you get to hang out and eat lunch with us, because I'm sure there's plenty, because we get to say that every time we have a potluck at a church. Amen? That's right. There's plenty. Come on. Fix you a plate and stay with us. My name is Scott Wright. If you don't know me, that's okay. Sometimes I like to remain anonymous. But in this case, I don't. I have basically, about 4 years ago, I ran into a problem that I couldn't fix. And that problem was I had parents coming to me asking me, my kid is on social media all the time. My kid is technology driven all the time. You're a teacher, what can I do? And I said, about what? What are you wanting me to do? I don't want them on it. I said, well, then tough. I can't do anything about that. So how can we do it better? I said, now that I can help with. So about 4 years ago, I began this little odyssey, I guess you'd say, that will never stop, as I mentioned in the Bible class hour. I did this last in about December. No, actually, that's incorrect. Did it back in January. Over the course of 2 months, about 15 to 20% of my material was outdated. And that's just the sake of what we're doing. That's just what it is with technology and social media, etc. I grew up in Florence, Alabama. I went to Mars Hill Bible School from the time I was in preschool to the time I graduated. I went to Freed-Hardeman University after that and got a 4-year degree in Bible and a minor in psychology. Decided that I didn't want to pursue necessarily a full-time career at that time because I got into coaching and really, really liked doing that. And so I started teaching and coaching right out of college. Spent 10 years at Madison Academy over here in Huntsville and really enjoyed my time there. But it was extremely stressful. I was teaching 4 core history classes, teaching 2 Bible classes, planning chapel, and then coaching basketball and coaching baseball and trying to be a youth and family minister part-time. It was a lot. And thankfully the Lord opened a door, and after 10 years there, my family and I moved to Rogersville, Alabama, a nice little community right there between Athens and Florence. My family lives in Florence. My wife's family lives down here at Somerville. So it's kind of almost a little bit halfway for us. And I am now the associate minister over at Rogersville Church of Christ. And I get to do a lot of really interesting things because my church family there, they're extremely supportive of doing seminars like this one because our elders there, those 4 men, see the value of it. And they love the fact when churches call and ask, can Scott come? And I feel a little bit like back in the old days when you used to go to your friend's house before texting and social media ruined all this, and you used to knock on their door and say, can Scott come out and play? That doesn't happen anymore. Now we text and we set up all that digitally, but that's the way I sort of feel. People call me and say, hey, can Scott come up and play? And I'm like, yes! And luckily I work for a church that is more than willing. And I don't know what that says. Sometimes I wonder if that just means they're trying to get rid of me, maybe? I don't know how that goes. I didn't thought about that till just now. It'll be a conversation when I get back. I am glad to be here. I am thrilled. Anytime a church calls and says, hey, will you come and talk about this, that really just does my soul good because that means you care. You're not willing to just let your kids drift, and that's fantastic to hear. That is incredible to hear. And I'm proud for you and proud of you. Take that with a grain of salt, but I'm proud for you that you have men and women here who are committed to trying to help their kids navigate. Because right now, honestly, it is like a minefield. For every good thing that we seem to find, we have 2 bad things, it seems like, pop up. And so if I can help in any sort of way, that's what I want to do. And several of these gentlemen here have my contact information. If there's something I can help you with privately that you don't feel like discussing here, please contact me. Please contact me, and I'll help you any way that I can. There's an older woman. She called her even older husband on the cell phone, and he answered, and she said, Herman, I want you to know that the news just reported that there is a car out of control going the wrong way on I-65. Herman took a moment. He replied, and he said, you're not going to believe this. There's hundreds of them. They're all coming at me. That's a little bit how I would describe some folks when it comes to technology. We feel like we're on the wrong side of the road and every car is barreling straight at us. That's how some of us feel sometimes. Especially, and I've noticed this over the last 4 years, especially when you say, you get people that use this quote, I am too old to know about technology. Oof. Mm-mm. Sorry, that excuse went out the window a long time ago, and you can't use that anymore. And here's why. Because you have, as I mentioned in the Bible class hour, you have kids who are raising their kids. You have your grandkids. You have nieces and nephews. You have kids in your church. And this is a real thing, and it's not going away. It's only going to become even more readily available. As I mentioned to someone earlier, more and more kids are getting phones earlier and earlier. More and more kids are getting social media earlier and earlier. Basically, Mark Zuckerberg, if you don't know who that is, Mark Zuckerberg invented Facebook along with a couple of his friends at Harvard, about 15, 20 years ago now. And Mark Zuckerberg, when he created it, intended it to be only for college students. If you go all the way back to when Facebook started, the only way you could sign up for Facebook was if you had an email address that ended in .edu, which meant that you were an active student at a university. Okay, so when Facebook started, it was only intended for 18 to 22-year-olds. And basically, they had it set up, the parameters were set up inside of that programming, that when you turned a certain age and your email went invalid, so you graduated from college or you dropped out or you didn't finish or whatever, then your profile was kicked off, removed from Facebook. So it was literally intended for college students. Well, as we know, it's not what happened. What ended up happening is people started setting up fake email addresses with .edu and signing up at 15, 16, 17 years old. So Mark Zuckerberg and his genius friends came back and said, well, we'll just open it up for anybody over the age of 13. Okay, which is how Facebook exploded onto our scenes and onto our computers. Everybody over the age of 13 could sign up. Well, guess what started happening? People started lying about their age. And people started signing up at 10, 11, 12. Now there really isn't that much of a police force, if you will, to watch for people signing up. You can sign up for Facebook as long as you have an active email address. You can sign up and claim that you're anybody. That should frighten you just a little bit. This afternoon at 1 o'clock, we'll talk about some specific apps that you need to be on the lookout for, that your kids probably either know about or already have. And I had to change my information on that because there's a couple that thankfully I will take absolutely 0% credit, but some of these parents that are very much active in watching their kids' social media went after some of these apps and have shut down two of the ones that I used to have to talk about. I don't have to talk about them anymore because they're no longer there. But some of us feel like that person driving on the wrong side of the road with cars flying at us. And here's what I want to do. I want to simplify this. I want to make this really easy for you. You should have a handout in front of you. If you don't, that's all right. We'll get them to you in just a minute. Here they come right now, as a matter of fact. I'll take blame for that because I didn't say when to pass them out. That's my fault. You'll get a handout here in just a second. And on that handout, you're going to see 8 little sections of questions. I'm going to move through these pretty quickly. I call this the technology trap. And what I mean by that is, honestly, we feel like we have to use it. And then we feel like that it is a negative. And we've talked about already that it's not always a negative. And to refer to it as always a negative is really just incorrect. There are some major positives that can come out of using technology, out of using social media. But you feel like you have to use it, and thereby there comes the terminology, the technology trap. You feel like you're trapped by it. I have no choice. I have to use it. I'm not able to break from that. It's a trap. Now, I want you to know something on the outset, that technology in and of itself is not evil, but there are people, more and more people are coming out now and saying, well, we do need to be a little more aware of some of the things that are out there. Robert G. Thompson's a sociologist. very, very popular sociologist, and he said the simple truth is that technology is still a poor substitute for human interaction. And the bottom line is, the more we study it, we're not necessarily intimidated by it, although some of us might claim to be. We're not really intimidated by technology. We're intimidated by the distance it puts between us and other people. That's what's intimidating, is when you start removing human interaction, we begin to get a little nervous about that. You start having flashbacks to Lost in Space and some of these 2001: A Space Odyssey, and some of these movies where the machines turned on the humans and tried to kill them. Think about movies like I, Robot. Will Smith was in a movie back in the early 2000s called I, Robot, and they used all these robots to basically sort of police the world and manufacture and all these kinds of things, and ultimately, guess what? One of the robots goes bad. And the robots start turning on the humans and trying to hurt and kill the humans. And that's sort of what flashes in our brain. We think, oh no. What if one day there is, the technology is overtaking the world? It's technology, which means it's man-made. At the end of the day, basically, what can you do to your computer if it starts panicking on you, if it starts messing up on you? What can you ultimately do to it? You can unplug it. And you know what? Doesn't matter how much power that thing has. Like mine right now is at probably close to 100% battery life. You know what will happen by the time I get home this afternoon if I unplug that? It will be dead. Because it's a machine. So we're not intimidated by technology. That's not what intimidates us. We're intimidated because it removes human interaction. Humans by nature are social beings. It's what we are. Why do you think in Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 2, when God is talking about creating mankind sort of being the jewel of creation in Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 2, what does he say about Adam? It is not good for what? Man to be alone. We are created as social beings. It's what we are. Think about it. In Genesis chapter 1 and verse 27, God says, let's make man in our image. So in his image he created them, male and female he created them. Genesis chapter 2, we find it's not good for man to be alone. I will create a helper made specifically for him. Genesis chapter 3, what did it say? God came to walk with man in the cool of the day. God is a social being. That's why it's so awesome when you think about what prayer does. It is your conversation with the creator of the universe. When you open your Bible and you look at the words that he has written to you, it is his conversation back to you. How amazing is that? We have a social God who created social people. We are by nature social. So you can't tell me that social media is all evil. You can't tell me that technology is evil because it's man-made. It can be stopped. It's not going to take over the world. So what it comes down to is simply this. Robert G. Thompson said it best. Technology is no substitute. It is a very poor substitute. Very poor substitute for human interaction. So here's what we have to do. We have to start talking about this idea of what is going on inside the home. So let's talk technology inside your house. Number one, has this technology brought our family closer together or pushed us apart? Okay, now you're starting to step all over my toes. Well, I told you this early, right? I will never intentionally hurt your feelings, but I will absolutely step on your toes. Don't raise your hand because I don't want to embarrass you. That's not the intention. But how many of us have handed our kids an iPad, a phone, or the remote control and said, go, just go? You ever done that? Don't raise your hand. I don't want to embarrass you. Just think. You ever done that? You ever give your kids technology and say, hey, just go? Have you ever had a moment where maybe if you've got older children, you come to the dinner table because you as a mother, you as a father have said, you know what, all those commercials, they've gotten to me. We're going to get back around the dinner table and eat as a family. Everyone come to the dinner table right now. We are going to be a family and we're going to love each other or else. It's kind of the way my mom operated. Come to the dinner table and like each other. I'll come to the dinner table. I make no guarantees about liking everybody. And you sit down and your teenage child, teenage son, teenage daughter is doing this or this. And you say, hey, put that down. We're going to have some family time. And their response is, ugh, family time. Does that ever happen? Maybe not in your house. Maybe not. in a lot of houses, that's exactly what happens. Do you remember the term latchkey kid? Do you remember that? We've sort of done that, except sort of in full acceleration. Now we're just basically saying we're not really sure we want to raise our kids at all. We just hand them technology and say, well, here you go. Now leave me alone. I want to go do what I want to do. It's a scary thing. So the first question you have to think about is, okay, we've allowed technology in our home. Now, you got to understand, technology is a really broad term. It's extremely broad. There was a time when hammer was technology. Okay, you understand that? Like, technology is simply something that helps you do your job better. So there was a time when a hammer, a wrench, those were technology. Those were breakthroughs in technology. Once upon a time, there was a guy that made a wheel, and they were like, wow, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened on the face of this planet, a wheel. Now, all of us got here on 4 this morning. There was a time, so technology is a really broad term. There was a time when a hammer, a wrench, a tire, those were all breakthrough technology. So it's a really broad term, but here's basically what we mean for the purpose of this morning. Technology is basically TV, computer, iPad, phone, etc. Those kinds of things. Okay? So as the technology in your home, has it brought you closer together? Because it can be a uniting factor. You need to know that. There are families who have what I call family movie night. Everybody brings their phones and puts them in a bucket or something, and they sit down and they all watch a movie together. That's awesome. That's great. That's really cool. Some families are doing Bible studies, and they're using their phones or their iPads to do those Bible studies. They're watching a video of a preacher, or they're watching a Bible study that's taking place, and they're participating in that Bible study. That's incredible. That's great. So it's not necessarily all negative here. There can be some really positive things that come out of technology being in the home, but you do have to ask yourself the uncomfortable question, is it uniting us or is it pushing us further apart? And you have to answer that honestly. Number 2, do you have clear guidelines in place? Oh boy. This is where the kids start like going, hey, wait a minute, shh, be quiet. Don't reveal to them the secrets. Okay, well, it's not that hard. Do you have rules? Do you have rules about technology in your house? So, for instance, you can watch that show and then you need to go find something to play with. You need to go outside, or you need to find some toys upstairs and all that stuff that we bought you. I mean, come on. You got buckets and buckets of toys, and you'd rather just sit here and just stare at a television screen. Now, come on. You got rules? Good for you. Those rules mean nothing if you don't enforce them. They're simply words. The fact that I look at my children and say, hey, listen, I don't mind you watching a little bit of TV, but after that episode goes off, we're going to turn it off. We're going to find something else to do. Daddy, can we watch one more episode? Well, I guess you can watch one more. Okay, well, what I've just done is I have negated anything that I said before. Any rule that I gave them just went flying out the window. They don't care, because now next time they know that when Daddy said you can watch that episode and then turn it off, it's not really what he meant. He meant that if he's busy doing something and he doesn't want to play with us, then he'll just tell us we can watch something else. Do you have rules? Do you have clear guidelines? Emphasis on the word clear. You need to make sure that your kids, that your spouse understands those guidelines. Yes, believe it or not, I've had to deliver this message to adults too, because I've had family members call me and say, listen, I don't know what's going on, but they never talk to each other. That husband and wife, they don't talk to each other. And whenever I see him, he's got his phone out and he's scrolling. She's got her phone out, she's texting. They never talk to each other. Hey, Scott, what do you do when you had families split up because of things that have happened in technology? What do you do? So you go back and you start over, right? Let's start at the beginning. Can we go through this list of questions and find where the problem was? Absolutely. 100 times out of 100, you're going to find the problem. There's a divorce attorney in Dallas, Texas, who has been doing this study, and I haven't found his latest information. This was up through about 2016. He had been sort of doing this sort of study kind of with people that would obviously comply with what he was asking them. He would ask questions about social media and about their participation in social media and those kinds of things. When these couples would come to him, he would try. He's a good man, okay, good man. He was trying to keep the marriages together, But when they would come to him, obviously at that point they are wanting to get away from each other. And so he would have mandatory counseling sessions with them before he would agree to be the attorney to oversee their divorce. And so in those sessions, he would ask them questions about social media. And he would tell them, I'm doing this for a study. I'm doing this for an educational purpose. So I'd appreciate your just complete honesty. It'll be anonymous. I will not reveal your names, but just, he said in over 60% of his cases where the couples got divorced, Facebook was mentioned as a problem. When he would go further, what he would find is a lot of times one spouse would have a Facebook page that the other spouse didn't know about. And they had made connections with high school sweethearts, or they'd made connections with college friends and people that they didn't want their spouse knowing they were friends with. Wow. So can we go back and find where the problem is? Oh yeah. It's pretty easy. You got to have guidelines, you got to have rules, and you got to have them clear and in place. Number 3, what about your child? We could actually put this as, can anybody? Can you or your child disengage easily from this technology? So if you look at your kid and you say, no more television after this episode goes off, do they look at you and go, yes ma'am, yes sir? They better, by the way, because if they're around me and I don't hear yes ma'am and yes sir, we're going to have a problem. A big problem. Because that's something everybody can do. That's ridiculous. All right, you want to get me on my soapbox, go ahead. Let me hear your kids say, yeah, to a grown-up. I will be all over my soapbox in about half a second. That's easy. If you're a kid in this room, all eyes on me. If you're a kid in this room and you don't say yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir to your parents, your grandparents, people that are older than you, you have a serious problem. You have a serious problem. That's an easy something you can do. And you know what that does? That fosters a really healthy relationship between you and that person. They have been through more than you have been through. Don't talk to them that they don't understand. I can show you biblically how that's improper. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. There's no temptation that has seized you except what is common to man, which means people have gone through it from the very beginning of time. Don't look at them and tell them that they don't understand what you're going through. They most assuredly do. And the majority of them, I mean a very small percentage would not, but the majority of them would be more than happy to listen and try to help. So the very fact that you disrespect them by not showing them proper terminology even is beyond me. Now I'll get off my soapbox and get back to what I was talking about. Can they easily disengage? So you say it's time for us to turn this off. Do they throw a fit? Or I guess actually in the South it'd be pitch a fit, right? Sorry, I'll get the correct terminology in a minute. Throw a tantrum, pitch a fit. I got it. Or do they say yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir? Hey, it's time to turn that off. Yes ma'am. Why? Because we have clear guidelines in place. And because going back to question 1, we're not going to allow the technology to pull us apart. Because we care about human interaction. We are social beings. Okay, number 4. Has this technology changed your child's behavior, mood, or personality? Has it changed your spouse's mood, behavior, personality? You see some blowback because they've been on social media or they've been on their technology, they've been on their phone all day, and so you look at your spouse and you say, I want you to talk to me. Hi, remember me? Yeah, we've been married a long time. Me and you. Remember there was a time we used to get on the phone and we'd talk for 4 hours a night. Now you're on your phone 4 hours and we talk maybe 6 words. Can they disengage easily from it? Has it affected their mood, their behavior? If it has, then there needs to be a very serious conversation. And again, each one of these piggybacks on the one before it. So if they can't engage easily, then their behavior has probably been changed. Their mood has probably been altered. And that's because there are no clear guidelines in place, and it's because you're allowing technology to separate you. This all works together. Okay, number 5, have we set up age-appropriate parental controls and blocks on this device? Now, let's talk about this for just a second. If you don't know, I can show you. I'll be more than happy to show you. This is where the teenagers want to kick me in the shins. I can show you how to get on their phone and block just about anything. I can even block that little precious camera they like taking all those selfies with. Man, they really don't like it when I tell parents that. Parents are like, I am sick and tired of getting 81 selfies a day from my kid. Could you please stop that? I can do it. I can absolutely do it. As a matter of fact, my sister-in-law had to text me the other day. She took her 2 boys to see the NCAA tournament. Took them to Nashville. She sends me a text. She says, hey, the games are about to start. Could you please tell me what the code is for my son's camera? He'd like to take a few pictures. I said, well, here's what it is. And she said, oh, okay, thanks. It's like, yeah, see, I mean, it's not that hard. Age appropriate may be the key phrase there. Age appropriate. If your kid is 11 years old, I am sorry, they do not need access to that camera. If they're going on a field trip, guess what? Mom or dad's probably going with them. If they're not, grandma and grandpa are probably going with them. They can take all the pictures. If they're 11 or 12 years old, they need to have all those numbers out of their phone, and the only number they need is you and 911. They don't need to be calling and texting everybody when they're 10 years old. That is insane to me. I have an 8-year-old who is already asking me for a phone. She's heard no in every language that's available all over this good planet. And she says, why? And I say, because. And she says, because why? And what do I say? Because I'm your father, and I said no. I'm not your friend. I'm your parent. There are some parents that need to hear that today. Stop being your kid's friend. Be their parent. I used to think my dad was so mean. I remember telling my mom, why does he have to be so mean? Because I felt like he was just always on me about something. He was always, it just felt like there was never a moment where we were just friends. I'm 34 years old now. My father will call me about once a week on his way home from work. And we have the best conversations, usually for 30 to 45 minutes. Do you know why? Because when I was a kid, my father was my father. Now that I'm an adult, he's one of my best friends. That's the way God intended that relationship to work. And there are some parents who at some point are going to realize the error. And sadly for some, it will be too late. Age-appropriate parental controls. You control. Number 6, does our child view usage of this device as a privilege or a right? Woohoo! It ain't a right. I'll go ahead and answer that one for you. I am 14 years old. I'm an American citizen. I have the right to an iPhone and text whoever I want, whenever I want, and you can't stop me. Want to bet? Want to bet? There's a video going around a couple of years ago. I can't help but share this with you. I know I'm probably running low on time, but I can't help but share this with you. There was a kid who would really, obviously parents had kind of let him get a little bit out of control as far as video games went. He was just constantly playing video games over and over, just constantly. Can never break him of it. He was just, he had his own little job, little paper route, so he'd make his own money, so he'd save up and go buy the next video game. And his dad had just had it. And he was doing poorly in school, and he had kind of back-talked his mother. And so this dad says, listen, that's it, no video games for a week. And the kid just falls apart, screaming, kicking, and stomping. It's a 15-year-old kid. Embarrassing. His dad said, listen, if you don't stop, I'm going to take him away for good. You can't do that. And you see the expression on the dad's face just change. He said, what did you say? You can't do that. I bought those. Those are mine. He said, but you live in my house, and you are breaking my rules. So I most certainly can. No, you can't. You know what the dad did? And this is probably not the right way to handle it, but I couldn't help but laugh out loud. He went in the kids' room. He took the video game system and every single one of the video games out of the room, took the TV with him, went out in the front yard, laid them in the grass in the front yard, cranked up his lawnmower, proceeded to run over everything with the lawnmower. and through video game pieces and plastic and television parts as far as the eye could see. And then you know what he did? Made the kid pick it all up. And I thought, I hope I never have to go that route, but man, that's impressive almost. Now, I don't know that you necessarily need to go that route. I don't necessarily think you need to be that dramatic. But you shouldn't have to be if you as the parent have made the rules and they are clear and you are enforcing them. You shouldn't have to go that route. Kids should know. They should know. They should know it's not a right, it's a privilege. You've allowed them to do that and you have enforced rules about it. Therefore, there shouldn't be any of those issues. Last couple of questions here. How would our family change if we took away these devices, this technology altogether? If there's one part of you that says, well, I'll tell you what, we'd be closer, then you need to review all these other questions. Because if that came across your brain, that, man, if we took away some of this stuff, boy, we'd be closer, then you may need to. There's a mom that I've gotten to be good friends with over the years, and she found out I was doing this, and so we've kind of kept in touch. There was some information she was looking for that I was able to share with her, and she said one of the things that they started doing after we had this seminar is she said we started having a week where we would just no technology at all. She said, mom and dad had cell phones, and for work they would have to check them, but they would check them at night before they went to bed. They would check them the first thing when they got up in the morning, and then the rest of the day they were put up. If they went to work, fine. They had them. Obviously, they need them for work, whatever. But the kids' phones were turned off and put away. She said we put them under lock and key, as a matter of fact. She said, and the television did not come on the entire week. Computer stayed off. She said we even hid the cords, locked the cords in the room where we put the phones. So they couldn't even plug the computer up, much less turn it on. She said, you want to know what happened? She said, my kids became my kids again. She said, my spouse and I, we talked for real for the first time in a long time. Now, that may not happen in your house. You need to know that. You need to know that. For every story like that, there's a story where the mom on day one gets bent out of shape, frustrated, I can't deal with them whining, and gives it all back and just gives up on it. Okay? You need to know that. So you try this in your home. It may not work for you. You may not be able to pull that off. Your job may not allow you to put your phone down for 12 hours a day. I don't know. But I know this, that if you look at that question and it says to you in your brain, man, things would be so much better. Things would be so much easier. We would be so much closer. And you need to examine what you're doing. Number 8 is one I had to add. I didn't normally put this question on there because I know for some people this is kind of an invasive question. And this can be somewhat insulting to them, and I don't mean it that way. Please don't take it that way. But it was a question I sort of toyed with taking out and not asking, and my wife and I were talking about it, and she said, no, at some point you're going to have to acknowledge that this is going on. I mean, you're going to be asked about it if you don't say it yourself, so here you go. Do you rely on technology to get your kids through church? One of the hardest things for me was one Sunday I was preaching, and I saw a mom come in, and she had 3 kids. She's by herself. She comes in, and they're all under the age of about 6, and so they're kind of running a little bit wild. And I remember her getting them into the pew, and she sat them down, and she handed each one of them a tablet. Not a writing tablet, an iPad. And those 3 kids they were wild. I'm talking running all over the place. As soon as she handed it to them, they didn't move. Entire service. And it was hard for me because I was asking this question. I was thinking about this question. I was thinking, for her, hey, listen, she's able to listen to the sermon. She's able to listen and study. And so it really tore me up. But I guess the reason I bring this up is because if it's the only way you can get them through class or church, then I think you're lying to yourself. Because it's not the only way. It's not. You know what? It may cause you some grief because you may have to take them out and whip that backside for them. But you know what? They probably need that too. And you may have to tell them you don't behave that way. And you may have to take away something when they get home. You may have to tell them, we were going to go out to eat at your favorite restaurant today, but we're not because of your behavior. But you know what you're doing? You are parenting them. And I hate to say this, but there's a lot of people out there who are handicapping their own kids. They're mentally shutting them down. They're telling them at an early age, well, I know that you can't sit still for that long. I know you can't listen for that long. So here, let me bail you out. I don't need to tell you a bunch of stories about back when I was a kid, and you don't need to necessarily go back there in your brain of when I was a kid, we did. This is a different type of kid. It's a different type of situation, but the principle doesn't change. If a godly parent who's acting like a Christian is treating their children the way they ought to be treated, that when you enforce a rule, which is we're going to sit quietly through this service, and if you don't, there will be punishment. All discipline seems what? Harsh at the time. It was just read to you just a minute ago. Hebrews chapter 12. It was read to you from right here. All discipline seems problematic or harsh at the time, but you value it as you get older. So I hesitate to ask that question, but at the same time, I think it's appropriate. If you're relying on technology just to get through services, then we need to go back through these other questions and figure out where the breakdown is. As we close this morning, I want to remind you of just one thing. Down there on the back of your page, you'll see 5 basic principles for using or introducing technology. I'm going to go through these really quickly. This is for you, parents. This is for you. Kids, this is for you because this is a way that you can sort of hold your parents accountable. Okay, number 1, be an example. Seems simple, but a lot of parents aren't doing it. Be an example. Okay, if they see you on the phone all the time, guess what? They're going to want to be on the phone all the time. If they see you on the iPad all the time, guess what? They're going to want to be on the iPad all the time. If they see you sitting in front of that television nonstop, they're going to want to sit in front of the television nonstop. Be an example. Number 2, be intentional. Be intentional. Think, engage, discuss, plan, monitor, adjust. Don't let your family relationships just happen. Be intentional. Speak to them intentionally. Look at your spouse and say, hey, listen, the kids are this has been happening. We need to talk about it. We need to be intentional. We need to talk about what's going on with them. We don't need to ignore it. We need to be intentional. Number 3, be proactive. Don't be reactive. Ooh, reactive is not good. Sometimes I understand you have to have it. You have to be reactionary in some things. I get that. But in parenting, you don't necessarily have to be. You can be proactive about a lot of things. Everybody else in the class is getting a phone. You're not. I'm not going to be reactive. 7 of the kids in the class have iPhone 10s. I don't care. You'll get a phone when your mother and I decide that it's appropriate for you to have one. And when you do, you will be thankful. Because it's what we believe is best for you. Be proactive. Number 4, be flexible. Okay, I know. We've sort of tried to say that you need to be hard and fast and hold it. Sometimes you're going to need to be flexible. You need to be understanding. Your kids are going to bring things to you you never thought they'd bring to you. Your eyes are going to be wide open to some things that you never thought you'd have to discuss. But because you have fashioned a strong relationship between you and them, they will feel comfortable to bring it to you. And they'll say, hey, this is happening. Listen, it breaks my heart every single time that you see where a child has committed suicide because of bullying. And the first thing that always goes through my mind is, did they not have anybody to talk to? And every story almost sounds the exact same. Well, he came from a broken home. He didn't have any friends. He kept to himself. Nobody really even knew he was there. Do you know what some of them happened? She came from a perfectly complete home. The mom and dad loved each other. They loved her. So what happened? What in the world? How could this happen? Well, mom and dad loved each other and they loved her, but were never really interested in what she was doing. She didn't really have anybody at the school, and she did this, and this thing happened, and people started making fun of her, and unfortunately, this is what happened. You as a parent need to be flexible. There are going to be some times where you're going to need to stop being the drill sergeant. You're going to need to be the counselor. You're going to need to be the arms that hug. You're going to need to be the tears that fall on their behalf. You've got to be flexible. That doesn't mean you change your rules. That doesn't mean that you don't enforce your rules. That just means that you got to be flexible. Number 5, last thing. Stay engaged. Stay engaged. It's not good enough for one day to you to walk in and say, hey, listen, guy came and talked at our church the other day. We're going to really enforce some rules. And then 2 weeks later, you gave up. It doesn't do any good. Stay engaged. As we close this morning, let me challenge you as we offer the invitation. Technology can become an idol just like anything else. You think about the rich young ruler, Luke chapter 18. He came to Jesus and he said, what must I do to get an eternal life? And Jesus said, well, keep the commandments. He said, oh, yeah, I got all that. Done. I followed all your rules. I got it. No problem. You remember what Jesus said to him? One thing you lack. Now, if I heard that from God, I would probably be like, awesome. That's it? Just one? Awesome. And I have to believe that maybe he was thinking that. Maybe he was thinking, really? Just one? Wow. That's incredible. And then Jesus drops a bombshell on him. Go sell everything that you have, give the money to the poor, and come and follow me. Wow. I can do anything but that. I don't know if technology is that for you. I don't know. I really don't. It's not my place to know either. But if there's something that is between you and God, doesn't it make sense to remove it? Why in the world would you carry that around? Why in the world would you continue to shoulder that stress and that pain and that anger and that frustration? Why? Why? There's no reason. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 11, come, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. In other words, Jesus said, hey, listen, I can take care of all that other stuff. Let me handle all that. You just come follow me. It won't be hard. It's not hard to follow Jesus. Now it's hard to stay in line sometimes. I get that. Sometimes we trip and fall. I get it. But you know what Jesus said? He said that he would stick his hand out and he'd help you back up. When Peter walked on the water, he lost sight. Why? Not because he was doing something evil. No, he was actually doing something miraculous, walking on water, but because he got to looking at the storms all around him. And he stopped focusing on Jesus. Maybe that's you. Maybe things that are going on in your life have caused you to stop looking at Jesus. Maybe you've never put on Jesus in baptism. Galatians chapter 3 says that's exactly what happens. For as many as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. What an amazing thing to be a part of. What an amazing thing to be a part of. This morning, if you have any reason at all to feel like your salvation is not secure, and I don't know what else to do but beg and plead with you to make that right. There's no reason to leave this place feeling that way. If there's something we can help you with publicly, that opportunity is yours. Let's make that right today. Come now as we stand and as we sing.